Okay, so we have a few people on now. So, right, I'm going to get started. This presentation is going to last, based on yesterday, it's going to last about 45 to 50 minutes. So I'd like you to stay to the end because there's important information coming at the end that will kind of make it worth your while. But also, if there are any distractions around you, if you can switch them off, put your phones on silent, turn them upside down. Mine went off in the middle of yesterday's presentation, so I was guilty and I learned a lesson there. But I'd like to stay focused on what is some interesting content that's coming that's kind of highly relevant to you, but is going to come fairly thick and fast, if that makes sense. So now, I'm not really going to spend a lot of time today introducing myself because the people I've invited onto this call are all kind of known to me at some level. You may be clients, we may just be connected on social media, or you may be on my email list, but I'm going to assume that at some level you kind of get a little bit of who I am and what I'm about. I guess the key bit for me is this journey of the last 11 years where I've been working predominantly with small and medium-sized businesses, helping them grow, working with the owners and the directors in the company to create growth. And primarily, I've been doing that in a role as a business coach. So for the first 5 years of my career, I was in a franchise system called Action Coach. And then I had an epiphany moment, which I'll talk about on this call, which made me spring out and take a slightly different direction. So one of the interesting things to understand is why people think in order to grow a business or in order to become an effective leader and manager, why they think they need help, i.e. why do they go to someone like me to coach them? And when I asked my clients, there's pretty much 4 things came out of why they felt they needed to engage me. One was to hold them to account, to make them accountable for doing the things that they committed to do. The second thing was to motivate them. It can be a difficult, sometimes frustrating journey. And sometimes you just need someone maybe to push the energy back into you to keep you moving forward. Thirdly, there was the honest broker role, the person who was able to look at you and kind of essentially call you out when you weren't behaving in a way that was helpful to you. And finally, as an ideas man, someone to create and brainstorm with, to create new ideas, to open up new possibilities. And so that's why I was able to bill people every month and be a retained coach, sometimes with some clients over many, many years. But there was always something that was nagging away at the back of me, in the back of my mind, as to why does this person believe that they need this kind of level of support? What is it that they believe is missing inside them that stops them from just being able to get on with it and do the job? And then it occurred to me that, I'd spent my whole coaching career creating powerful answers for the question, why do you need a coach? When actually the real question I needed to ask was, why do you think you need a coach? So what is it that goes on inside of you that makes you believe that you're kind of not enough, that somehow there is something else or some way else of being that you need to be doing? And so it was a personal breakthrough for me, actually, because I was struggling in my coaching practice. And I'll tell you that story in just a while. That led me to ultimately abandon this kind of retained coaching approach and move more into what I like to call a transformational space. So I come in and work with people in ways that make them change so that they're able to go on and do what it is they need to do. And that's what I mean by leverage leadership. So let's just take a look at that idea a little bit more, this idea of transformation. Now, the tiger here that you see looking into the pond and seeing a reflection of a kitten back, or at least I hope that's what you see, or the drawing's not very good. Originally, the first time I came across this picture, it was in reverse. It was a kitten looking into a mirror and seeing a tiger looking back at it. But when I thought about that, that isn't the experience that most of us have in our lives of ourselves. Uh, Insofar as we have a tendency to argue for our limitations rather than for our strengths. So we're generally quite effortlessly can come up with a list of things we're not good at or things we're weak in. And we struggle to identify our strengths and who we are at our actual absolute best. So the question I'm beginning to ask people now is pretty much, what to do. And even if you don't, with the power of these devices these days, you've got the worldwide collective knowledge base at your fingertips. You can go find out the what to do and the how to do it. It's what stops you getting on and doing it. So for me in my life, most of my corporate career, I struggled with what was known as imposter syndrome, this kind of sense that I wasn't good enough. So the reflection I saw when I looked in a mirror was that of someone who was faking it, who wasn't, shouldn't have got to the amazing levels in the corporate world that I got to, and a kind of imposter. And it was a shift for me. It was actually going away on a program for a weekend where I was asked to do a particular exercise about telling my story. And it was telling my life story, but I was asked to do it in a very specific way. And it was literally like a bomb went off in my head. And everything I'd ever seen about myself just fell away. And for the first time in probably my entire adult life, I saw myself as the powerful person that I am, and the capable, able, experienced person that I am. So pretty much from the moment that happened to me, I also simultaneously realized that business coaching was not the right direction for me to continue to pursue. So I spent the 5 years since that moment refining and developing my skills to help people go through that level of transformation. So why is this kind of relevant to people working in senior roles? I know all of you on this call are in senior roles and sometimes even the owners of these businesses. And so I run a survey every year, and this year I had about 50 responses. It's just my way of, if I'm honest, it's a bit of a cheat sheet. It's my way of understanding what's going on out there so I can market to what people are worried about. And what was interesting this year, there's two things that are interesting in the graph you can see in front of you. One is that the lowest score on any of the issues I raised was 3.5. So that tells us that running a small business is a very complex, very multi-dimensional set of problems, opportunities, and challenges in the melting pot. But what really struck out to me was that, I kind of expect sales and margins and customer relationships to appear as high priorities. But what really strikes me as interesting is the level of stuff around leadership, employee engagement, and recruitment that seems to be really high on people's lists. And there's a reason why. The quality of the leadership in your business is the single biggest leverage point. If you think that every decision, every idea, every action, and every interaction that happens within your leadership team either drives the business forward or takes the business backwards. So it only takes a very small shift in capability and in how people show up as leaders to make a huge impact. I often say to people, the difference between a £1 million business and a £10 million business is one new thought, followed by some intensive action. So when we think about what a leader actually is and what a high-functioning leader is, I don't draw any distinction at all between what I regard as a high-functioning human being and a high-functioning leader. So in essence, in order to be a good leader, we have to just be a high-functioning human being. And I became interested in what then gets in the way of us becoming high-functioning human beings. So this beautiful, elegant model summarizes psychology insofar as I can see. Because at one point in our life, we were all high functioning human beings. We were children. Children are born perfect. They don't need therapy. They don't need me coming along twice a week to inspire them to become curious and fearless and to explore the world around them. They just kind of crack on with it. And in this metaphor, this is the diamond. This is the person we actually are when we just show up at our best. We don't allow a lot of toxic thinking into how we are. Children don't worry about the past or worry about the future. They remain relentlessly in the present. But then what happens over time when a child begins to become aware of itself, it then begins to start to learn about who it is and how the world around it works. And primarily that learning comes from other people. We're shaped by our parents, our teachers, our peer group, our community, and we build this model of how we believe the world works, and particularly how we are positioned within that world. So then we start to cover the diamond in horseshit, because the horseshit represents who we think we are, not who we actually are. And we take this identity into education and then into higher education for some people, and then into the world of work. And at some point, we begin to realize that we don't kind of like who we think we are. We don't quite fit in, or we're not quite as powerful as that person over there, or if only we could be more of this and less of this. And instead of chipping away at the horseshit, what do? We paint nail varnish over it. We cover up our flaws, and we start to act how we think we are supposed to be. So we begin to conform to the patterns that we believe make us a useful person. So we go in the wrong direction. But what if you could remove some of that nail varnish and you could chip away at the horseshit? You could kind of get back to the essence of who you truly are when you're at your best. Because that would enable you to move beyond the limits of what you currently perceive as safe and normal. And if you assume leadership from that position, whilst it might be a bit scary and a bit disorientating at first, because the urge for familiarity will try to pull you back into the horseshit. If you have someone that blocks your retreat, eventually it will begin to feel comfortable, and operating from who you truly are becomes a day-to-day reality. And from that position, you can attack whatever it is you're doing in your job or in your business at full tilt. And I've seen this happen with clients. I've seen some of my clients reach that breakthrough moment, and then they were never the same again. Now, for me, that breakthrough moment, that sort of smashing of the horseshit, if you like, was a cataclysmic event. It was an overnight thing. But I found for most people, it doesn't work that way. It takes a number of approaches to be able to get you to transform at that level and see yourself as the true person you are. And I think there are 4 things required. First of all, you need to understand the principles of how you show up, and you need to understand them deeply. Secondly, you need an opportunity to apply those principles and to test and play with them in a safe environment. And thirdly, you then need to be able to experience what it's like to hold that position and do epic stuff in your company. And that will then create a sense of embodiment. The 4th thing is to actually then to be able to embody the behavior so it becomes so natural. It's just a way of operating that you don't need to think about. Wow, all of that. So how do we do that? Well, I broke it down. So I came at this from a view of what is it that I do for other people in a way that if I could find the models that underpin that behavior and then reverse that so that the other person began to operate like that, I could create a self-coaching human being, a high-functioning person that can sort their way out of whatever is thrown at them, no matter what is going on in the world. So this isn't about adding stuff onto you, making you somehow different. This is about debugging, getting you back to the essence of who you are so you can perform at your absolute best. And there were just 4 key things. That high performance zone in the world of business sits in the middle of these 4 kind of levers, if you like. The first one's commercial acuity. If you want to operate in a commercial environment, it kind of makes sense that you understand the simple principles of business. And it's amazing how often I find really talented people operating and contravening some of these basic fundamental principles. Secondly, you need clean action. You need an ability to take good decisions and intensive action in pursuit of the outcomes that you want. And thirdly, you need the ability to connect and build purposeful relationships with all the other people that have to be involved in getting the outcomes you want. And then finally, you have to have this ability, this calibration, this ability to calibrate how you are showing up and to be able to regulate your state of mind, or at least be aware of the impact that your state of mind is having in any particular moment. So I hope that's making sense so far, because this is really important. This is at the core of the work that I do. So any thoughts and stuff, feel free to stick them in the chat box. Any questions that are mulling around in your mind, and I'll make sure I pick them up at the end. So let's look at these just a little bit in a bit more detail. So this wonderful drawing here represents how you show up and how it is that you do what you do in the way that you choose to do it. So if you think of your day-to-day life as a series of sequence of things that happen, it boils down to you're either making a decision, you're doing something, taking some sort of action, you're interacting with another human being, or you're creating ideas or doing research to create ideas. That's pretty much what a day consists of for anyone. But the problem is we misunderstand how our own psychology works. This is how we think we work. Is we think we're fairly rational human beings. We think we perceive the world and situations as they truly are, and we create rational responses to those things. But in reality, there's a mediation process that goes on. What actually happens is what we perceive is filtered through a number of mechanisms in our mind. Because what actually happens is you don't see the world as the world is. You see an internal representation of the world. So when something happens out there, you filter it through a number of filters. I like to think of them as 3 key questions. You filter them through who you think you are in relation to what's going on, what it is you actually want in relation to what's going on, and how clearly you believe you are perceiving what is going on. So you filter all this data, and then you create what is more often or not a fairly patterned response. So you might think you're free-willed, but actually you're operating from deep set patterns that were pretty much nailed by the time you were about 7. Now, when you can learn to recognize that this is the system that's in play, you can begin to make choices about operating outside of that story and those kind of limited beliefs. And you can begin to perceive things differently and perceive them more clearly. And as a result of that, have access to a far wider range of responses. So this of the 4 things is at the heart of performance. The ability to perceive and to respond with clarity and with effectiveness is what leadership pretty much is about. But then one of my favorite straplines that I use, certainly in my book, and I use it a lot in my training and my work with people, is that business is simple. It's people that make it complicated. So if you look around you as in the position of leadership that you're in, there'll be a wide array of relationships that you have to manage, upwards, downwards, across, and outside of your organization. And each of these relationships has a different power dynamic in play. So the way you relate to your boss will not be the same way you relate to your subordinates, or you relate to your peers, or you relate to your customers and suppliers. And you have to navigate your way through all this. So a couple of years ago, well, in fact, 4 or 5 years ago now, I created a Sales Ninja program to train salespeople. And I was looking at the process of the structure of the conversation that salespeople need to have in order to make a sale. And I ran the program and it was very successful. And then I ran a customer service ninja program off the back of it. And then ultimately, I also began to run leadership development programs. And when I came to write the copy about customer service and about leadership in terms of communication skills, I realized it was the same model, the same 4-step model. So for you to build a purposeful relationship with anyone, first of all, obviously you have to have a connection with them. You have to cross the bridge to be able to interact with them. And then secondly, you have to understand the world as they see it. So just to go back a slide here, you have to be able to get into their head to see how all of this stuff works for them, particularly if you want influence over what it is you want that person to do. Understanding them first is the prerequisite. Then you have to be able to communicate clearly and effectively in ways that other people will understand and that will enroll them. Because ultimately, the goal of any of these relationships and connections is some sort of action or some sort of outcome that you're looking for, whether it's the changed behavior of an employee, or it's a customer buying something from you, or a customer not leaving you because there's been a visit from Mr. Cockup. So we then move on to commercial awareness. So what does it mean to have commercial acuity? And when I worked at Tesco's, I applied for a job. This was many years ago. I applied for a job as a buyer. I did really well in the interview. The guy said I gave one of the best interviews he'd ever had, but he didn't give me the job because he said I didn't have commercial awareness. And now, bear in mind, at that point, I'd been working in audit for about 4 or 5 years in that company, and I'd gone in and done reviews of pretty much every aspect of that business. I knew that business, how that business worked, as well as the most senior people in that business, and probably a little bit more, if I'm honest. And one of the things that was really interesting to me was that the breadth and depth of this, but actually, it was all very simple. It all comes down to kind of 4 levers. So whenever you're making a decision or you're creating a strategy to grow or develop your business, you have to just take into account the impact that has on how your business is perceived in its marketplace, the impact that change will have on the customer journey and the experience of the customer, the impact on the economics, so that is the profitability and the flow of cash through the business, and the impact on the structure of the business itself in terms of the people, the systems, the data, and the assets that the business has and needs. So as long as you consider all those things, now there's a couple of bits of detail underneath this, which I flesh out in the programs that I run that you need to be aware of. But ultimately, commercial awareness is the ability to take all these things into account and to then make the right call in terms of the trade-offs and moving into what will always be uncertainty. So it's about limiting risk and maximizing opportunity. And when you understand that, you're able to realize that whatever happens in your business, you will be able to plot a course out, a rational commercial course. And then the 4th lever of high performance is what I call clean action. Clean action was born out of a conversation I had with a client years ago. I was helping them with a particular problem. They had a problem with one of their major customers and they were at risk of losing them. So they asked me to help them figure out what it was they needed to do. And after the conversation, which lasted about 45 minutes, we had the thing solved. The client looked at me and said, I wish I could just think like you. You know, the whatever I problem I present you with, you have this way of being able to help me sort it out. And it got me thinking, because I went away and thought, what is that I do? Because to me, it felt at the time, it felt effortlessly natural, you know, because this is an embodied process for me. And what I uncovered in the research I did on myself was an unconscious pattern that I run. And it's a 5-step sequence. So when someone says to me, we're thinking about doing this, or we've got a problem with this, or I need your help with this, I drop unconsciously into a sequence. And that sequence begins with me setting up a gap. So if you think about it, whatever the problem is that you're facing, whatever it is the opportunity you're facing is, or you've been tasked with doing, the implication there is that there is a gap somehow between where you want to be and where you are. And this is as true of life as it is of business. And the clearer I can get you to be about those two positions, the more it sets up a creative tension. And it's a combination of dissatisfaction and vision that will motivate you to take action. And if you don't have that right thing in place, you'll never be motivated to act, or you'll keep putting it on the back burner to deal with another time. So there's this creation of a gap. Because once that tension is in place, the answer normally falls out quite easily. There's normally a sequence of actions that can be taken that will resolve the gap, that becomes quite obvious to you once you see the gap for what it is. Now, this isn't necessarily the easiest path or the most comfortable one. It's the most direct route between point A and point B that we're looking at. But then, you know, once you start treading on that gap, a number of things will happen. Number one is the world, you know, so you start treading on that path of least resistance. Number one is the world starts changing. So stuff comes up that you hadn't anticipated. So you need to be able to measure where you are and whether you're making the required progress. And you put in place a protocol of measurement. And that's something you'll notice me doing when I coach you. So how are you going to measure that? How are you going to know if you're on track or not? And then you have to deal with any obstacles that come up. And I've spent a lot of time analysing what I think the key obstacles that get in the way of people just doing what it is they're supposed to be doing. And I think there are two. There are logistical obstacles such as time and money, and they're just a matter of choice and a matter of taking the actions necessary to put them in place. But then most of obstacles are by nature mental obstacles, i.e. something interrupts the you from executing the action that you know you need to take. And we can understand and identify most of these well in advance of actually getting on and doing it. So when I bring that all together, that is essentially a coaching conversation. By the way, you can use this in any conversation with employers. It's particularly useful in performance reviews to start. But there's one little nuance that I want to talk about that I use when I'm using this model, which you'll notice, those of you that have worked with me, is my starting point is not where are we now. So when someone presents a problem to me, the first thing I do is go to the position of what would this look like if it was fixed? Because what I know is that does two things. Number one, generally, when you understand what the thing looks like when it's fixed, you realize it isn't such a big problem as you thought it was. But secondly, if I ask you to describe a situation when it's working beautifully, it shifts your state of mind up into a more resourceful space from which I know solving the problem is a lot easier. So that's a little hack that I use particularly with this type of process. So wow, what I've just thrown at you is an awful lot of content there. So I'm just going to take a mouthful of coffee or tea here and just ask you, what do you think? Type something in the chat box. What is it you think about what you're hearing so far? Does it make sense? And does it feel like something that if you were able to access these 4 levers, you could see that your performance would improve? Excellent. So yes, absolutely. um, yeah, the current model on the screen is going to be useful for my new performance management strategy. It's useful for everything, Estelle. It is a tool for solving anything. And it's also a tool from no matter how deep in the shit that you feel you are, it's the tool to use to be able to move out of the position that you're in towards something different. I've just had another question. Is it really possible to change someone in that way? And the simple answer is yes, because I've seen it happen to me and I've seen it happen to clients. The complexity comes when you, because we're all different. So the complexity comes because we're all different. So therefore, to create this level of transformation means I have to have multiple approaches that I'm able to use so that I can try different things out with different individuals so that they get it, so that they have that experience of transformation. Because once you've caught a glimpse of that and you've embodied that state, it will then feel effortless to you. It's really interesting in my own life. I don't suffer with crisis of confidence in any way, shape, or form, and yet that used to define my life. And I don't feel different, but I am different. So that's the type of change I'm pointing at, a change that is deeply embodied. Yeah, simple images are, there isn't anything complex in here. The complexity comes in creating the transformation so that these tools embed they become part of who you are and how you are. But again, they're fairly natural to all of us. So that's the skill, if you like, that I bring to the party here, is that ability to create that transformation. And Estelle, you're absolutely right. Future state as a starting point is always more resourceful, simply because if you're wading around in a pool of shit, and all you're thinking about is the pool of shit, that is not a very resourceful position from which to plan an escape from the pool of shit. Imagining laying on a nice beach surrounded by beautiful scents and a cocktail is a far more resourceful place from which to plan, right now, how do I move? Excellent. So let me take you through how I'm going to go about doing this, because I've done many iterations, many experiments. I've tried different approaches, I've tweaked, I've refined. But I'm really interested in what results you could achieve. So just thinking about you as an individual, or the people in your organization that you hold responsible, you hold in leadership positions, what could you achieve from that position where you had absolute clarity of how things are and what it is you were seeking to get to, that you had absolute commitment, that you were able to act in spite of all of the signals going on in your head or the internal resistance that you feel. And you had the confidence to know that whatever comes up, you will deal with it and you will find a way to move on and away from bad stuff, or you'll find a way to move towards the things you actually want. That, to me, is the position I'm working with. And not only that, but if you could actually enjoy the experience. The thing I know about good leaders is they kind of love leadership. They kind of love that position. They love to hold that position. But you can only do that if your position is authentically you. And everyone has an authentic leadership position, which is what this program is really about. So the way I'm going to do it is not in a traditional coaching model, or not in a traditional training model. The problem with coaching is I keep those 4 tools to myself. I make you spend lots of money with me every month, and then I help you using my tool set. And then I put my tools away and I go away and I come back 2 weeks later when you need me to chip away at the horse shit a little bit, or you need me to push you forward a bit. So coaching creates a dependency. So coaching isn't, to me, a viable model for transforming somebody. But similarly, training doesn't do it on its own, because training misses out the opportunity for you to deeply experience and embody these things. And that's where the transformation takes place. So I kind of always knew it would be a hybrid product, and I've continued to tweak and twiddle over the years to get it right. And then a few weeks ago, actually, I finally came up with something. There was one more thing that was not quite right for me, and I came up with this idea of the 60-90 challenge. So one of the problems I find with training people on my commercial leadership programs, on my business breakthrough programs, is that they get mixed up between the training and the execution. So, and because of the way my brain works, I tend to jump ahead and just give them tools to suit whatever's going on for them at the moment, which is helpful in the short term, but in the long term doesn't get them where they need to be. So the 60-90 is my line in the sand in terms of how I want to split this program. So the first 60 days are all about understanding and applying these 4 ideas into your business. So if you like, this is the training component. This is where I take you through what the principles are that underpin these 4 levers. And I get you to go away and play with them. You create a sandbox, which is your business or your role in your business. You create a sandbox and you play with these ideas and you feed back what's happening, and you reflect and you begin to understand how these ideas work. And at the end of the 60 days, you should have a good understanding and a bit of experience of what it's like to operate from that position. But then we go into a 90-day cycle, and that cycle is all about execution. It's all about taking on the hairiest, biggest, or most exciting thing you could do in the business to shift it forward. And it's about taking that on as a project and having me coach you through that using these tools continually. Because what I know happens is we forget in the anger and the fury of the day to day. It's very easy to forget these 4 levers. So having me there to keep pointing you back at it until you deeply embody the experience of operating from this new position. So if that sounds exciting, then you are definitely in the right place. So I've got a little bit of detail here. I'm not going to spend too much time with it. But so the first 60 days, in essence, are 6 modules. We look at clarity. We look at getting you absolutely clear on the outcomes you want, both for yourself, for your business, and for your customers. We look at your identity. We look at where is your true leadership center? Where is the place from which that confidence, resilience, and effectiveness becomes effortless to you, and that you're able to deal with whatever comes up? We look at how you connect and who you need to connect with, and the different tools at your disposal for building connections where they're not present and strengthening them where they are. We'll look at the customer view. We'll look at how your company sits in its market, and also how what you do influences and shapes the experience of your customers as they go through their life cycle with you. And we'll look at economics. We'll look at the profit and loss of the business and the flow of cash. But I'll be giving you this in a very different way, in a way that is really resourceful and useful to those of you running a business or involved in a small business, that will mean you'll be able to contribute at a much higher level in terms of economic and financial understanding. And then finally, the last module in this 6, we'll use the clean action model. And specifically, we'll use it to develop a plan for the next 90 days of execution. So I'll get you to actually plot out a plan, and I'll work with you on that to create a plan of transformation in your business over the next 90 days. And that'll be a plan that includes transforming you, transforming the way the company performs, and the results that it gets. And that's the execution element of this program. That's the 90 of the 60. So there are 4 ways you can engage in this program. There's going to be an online version using this platform I'm using with you today. And there'll be follow-up exercises after each session as well. There's going to be a group session. At the moment, I've got 5 places on this group session. And that's 6 modules delivered over 4 days of small group training, where you'll get to hang out with other people on the same journey. And I've always found that, I don't have all the answers, but when you're in a room full of 6 other people that are similarly motivated to help you succeed and help themselves succeed, the answers are normally apparent. And you'll also get 6 wildcard sessions. So a wildcard session is a coaching session that you need for when you become stuck. You can just book one with me and you can talk me through, and I'll use those tools, but I'll show you how I'm using those tools to help you get moving again. There's then going to be a hybrid version of the group program, which is a group, but also with one-to-one. If you're running a business or you're in a senior position, this is probably the right program for you because it's much more personally focused. And then finally, there will be a one-to-one option where I'll deliver the whole program on a one-to-one basis. So I'm just pulling up. I've actually got some notes you'll be delighted to know that I made this time. So let me just explain a couple of things about this. My goal in running this program and running it in this way specifically is that the 90-day challenge will more than pay for the investment in any of the programs at any level. That is my goal. So I'll be looking for those outcomes to be really impactful on the business so that you can turn around at the end of the day and you can tell me and all the other people that might want to do this program in the future, you can tell them, oh yeah, it paid for itself. That's my number one fundamental goal. But beyond paying for itself, I'm equipping you to be able to move forward with absolute confidence to go on to do whatever it is you feel you need to do. The program is guaranteed. Every program that I'm running now will have a guarantee. The guarantee will be if you don't experience the transformation that you had hoped for and had expected to achieve, I will carry on coaching you until you feel that you have. So I will keep going with you. I will not give up on anyone that comes through these programs. I just had a question up from Estelle. When does the new program start? Hold with me, Estelle. I will answer that in just a short while. So next week, I'm starting a marketing process, the first major marketing campaign I've run for some while to drive new people into my funnel. But before I did that, I wanted to offer this program out to people that are either connected as clients with me at the moment or are connected via social media or via some level of interaction with me. So this is an offer that I'm making today, which is exclusively for those of you that kind of already know me. Let's call it a reward, if you like, for the loyalty you've shown. Even if you've never worked with me, and the fact that you're on my email distribution list shows a degree of loyalty that you've been following my journey and you've been following some of my ideas. So when these products go to market, this is going to be the market pricing that they're going to go with. So the online program will be $1,495. The group program I talked about will be $4,450. The group one-to-one hybrid will be $8,995. And the one-to-one program that is totally done one-to-one will be $12,995. Now, these prices relative to how much you'd pay for a business coach represent really high value, particularly given that they are transformational programs. They are not retained coaching programs. But the prices I want to offer to you as people that are already aware of me and have already kind of connected with me in some way are reduced. So the online program will be $995. The group program will be $3,495. The group one-to-one hybrid is $5,995, and the totally one-to-one program is $9,995. Now, as I say, these represent exceptional value, and particularly given that my relentless focus will be on making sure that the investment more than returns on itself. So if you're interested in one of these programs, the next intake is going to be in April. So I'm taking people on now. And as an added bonus, anyone that joins the program immediately or commits immediately, I will be doing some one-to-one work with them in the run-up to that April. So you get a bit of bonus from me as well. So what are the next steps that you need to take if you want to engage on one of these programs? If it's the online or the group program that you're interested in, all you need to do is email me and I'll take care of that and say, right, I want to go on this program. If you're interested in doing the group one-to-one or the one-to-one program itself, then the right thing to do is for us to have a conversation first to make sure that it fits with where you are now, and that also we're going to be a good fit to work together. There are some of you on this call today that I know already and I know would be a great fit for this, but I feel it's important that we just sense check that. So the program will start mid to end of April. I'm just sorting out all the venues and accommodation and the accommodation for the training days, the training rooms and things at the moment. And so it will be mid-April. I will send you the prices by email, Estelle. Or in fact, you'll all get a copy of this presentation because I have figured out how to record it. So this one's actually recorded. But take a next step. So even if the next step is just to engage with me in a conversation to find out a bit more, if there's something on your mind that you want to explore first, or let me know how you want to start, and I will make all of that so for you. So I'm just going to have a look at any other final questions I've got here. What is a wildcard coaching session? Well, hopefully I've answered that one. The wildcard coaching session is that kind of thing when you get stuck from time to time, rather than wallow in it, then I just want you to book a session with me so I can help you use these tools to find your way out. And I've had another question here about surely each business is unique. Therefore, any commercial model of it will be flawed. Well, without going into detail on this, I've identified that across all the clients I've worked with over 10 years, that there's only 4 fundamental business models, and they are all just variations on a theme. So I actually don't think that every business is unique. And when you boil it down, every business is pretty much the same. And I've had another question: what happens after the program? Now, let me answer that in 2 ways. First of all, my goal is that by the end of the program, you don't need me. That's my fundamental goal. What I have noticed is so far, people that have come through these types of programs have found it helpful to engage with me on an ongoing basis. But that's not a prerequisite. That's not something I would suggest unless you really find it. But even those that are engaging with me now are doing so on a quarterly basis. So literally, I sit down with them once a quarter. Now, bear in mind, as a business coach, that was fortnightly normally. So you can see that the leap they've taken. So in terms of cost of ongoing support, it's massively reduced from what they would normally pay. So hopefully that answers that question. But my goal is that you don't need anything after this program. But some people just like to stay in touch with me, like to be reminded of these ideas from time to time. So, hey, well, look, thank you very much for listening. We've landed on the 50-minute mark, which is pretty much where I thought we would be. I hope you found something in here that is useful that you can take away and use in your business now. That's certainly the intention of this presentation. And for those of you that are ready to move forward, make a decision, take an action, and we'll get you moving and we'll get you going. So thank you for listening. It's been a real pleasure. It's been a real pleasure to engage with you today. And I look forward to catching up with you all again really soon. Take care then. Bye-bye now.